Hey, as you're having a seat, come on, put your hands together for the one, the only, Jay Gilligan, everybody.
Thanks, man. Hi, my name is Jay. I live in Stockholm, where I teach juggling at the National Circus School of Sweden. In fact, it's a university. You can get a bachelor's, a master's, and even a PhD in the circus arts. It's pretty crazy. Growing up in Ohio, I never thought such a thing would exist. And the focus of what I do there is I work with the tools that we use and how they shape our work. Laying here today on the stage are things that are so innovative in the world of juggling, and yet they look very innocent, I think, but I hope I can explain to you how much they mean to us. So here I'm holding in my hand a normal-sized juggling ring. And I have to say that in my 30 years of juggling, if you count all the hours of practice I put into juggling with only rings, none of the other shapes, you get about 2 years of my life. 2 years of constant practice, day and night, 24 hours a day, of only juggling these rings. And at one point, I had to sit down and ask myself during these 2 years, why? Why is this a normal-sized juggling ring? Because in fact, it is a normal-sized ring. Any ring you'll see is this size. It's 13 inches. And this journey of figuring out why things are how they are has led me to change how I look at juggling for the rest of my life. I discovered that in 1976, a man named Professor Confidence went to Taiwan to produce the world's first commercially available plastic juggling ring. And he was there in the factory in Taiwan. There's a bit of a language barrier. And the owner of the factory says, well, how big should the ring be? And Professor Confidence looks around the office, picks up a circular tin of cookies, puts it on a piece of paper, and draws a circle around it. And that's how big juggling rings are, for no better reason than that. So back in 1976, juggling rings were as big as a box of cookies in Taiwan. But in fact, the box of cookies was not this big. The box of cookies was smaller. So the first rings that Professor Confidence made were actually so small that they didn't fit over your head. And some jugglers thought, well, hey, it would be pretty nice to do a trick where I could put all the rings around my neck. So it wasn't until the second generation of juggling rings that Professor Confidence made that they became the normal size, 13 inches, that you can put on your head and do the trick like I showed you a few moments ago. So about 15 years ago, another company came out with smaller juggling rings, the ones I just showed you. And when these came out, I have to tell you, I was quite surprised and honestly a little bit angry. First of all, I was surprised because they're completely random. They're too small and too light to control very well. They don't juggle very well. It's not so fun to catch them. They move a lot in the air. There's not a lot of inertia after I throw the ring. And so I was a little bit angry because some company had invested time, effort, and energy to make these new, smaller rings for what I thought could be no apparent reason. I mean, unless I was missing something, that there was a gap in the market for really tiny, small, child ring juggling prodigies. You know, that's where the money's at. So they really filled that niche, you know, and cashed it out. It made no sense. So I made it my mission to justify this ring's existence. And I thought, I'm going to make juggling tricks that can only be done with this smaller size ring and not with the normal size ring. In fact, it turns out there's a lot of tricks you can do with the smaller rings that weren't possible before. For example, there's a really nice trick with 6 balls where you juggle the 6 balls as if they were 3 balls. You're throwing 2 balls at a time. So before, if I should do, thank you, if I should do that same trick with the normal size rings, I can throw 2 rings from the same hand, no problem, in the same way I was throwing 2 balls from the same hand. And you can see I can catch them. But when I catch them, they come down at the exact same time, it means that if I want to catch them now, I have to use both hands. So if I should catch them using only one hand, you can see my one hand would have to be in two different places at the same time, which, as far as I know, is not possible yet. But with this invention of the smaller size juggling ring, along with the larger size juggling ring that the same company made, it means now I can juggle that 6-ball pattern using 6 rings instead. And it looks quite different, but I think it also looks really nice. So this is a trick that wasn't possible until about 15 years ago. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. And so, for the past 15 years, I've had a lot of fun playing around with these 3 different size rings. I have the normal size ring, the smaller ring, and the bigger ring. And it's been really a lot of fun. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you that it took me until last year to think, oh, I guess I could have different sizes than only 3. I could make even more sizes. It took me 15 years to figure that out. So I went to Japan, and I had some juggling rings made by the best juggling manufacturer on the planet, and he made me these rings in 5 different sizes. And again, the challenge is, how can I juggle these 5 different size rings in a way that is only unique to them, that doesn't use the 3 different sizes? So I'd like to show you right now a really nice 5 different sized ring trick. Thank you, yes. So you'll notice that already this trick is quite different looking than the one I just did before with the orange rings. And it makes it very unique. These rings have to be the exact same size to stack up like that and not fall down. So after changing the size of the circles from bigger to smaller, we started to think, well, maybe they could be other shapes as well, instead of circles. Maybe like a square or, in fact, a triangle. So, right? Triangles. Equilateral triangles. Thank you, thank you. I don't have enough time today to get into the isosceles, but maybe later tonight, when we do tonight. So, again, the question becomes, what can I do with triangles that I couldn't do with the circles? Of course, I could throw a triangle in the air and catch it, but I could have done that with any of the different sizes of rings. I could also throw an apple into the air, a knife, a bowling ball, a flaming torch, a kitten, or whatever. But that's not unique. What makes juggling triangles unique? And so, I'd like to try to do a trick or a pattern where I have to use triangles. Now you'll notice in this pattern, the triangles are touching each other. In the same way, when I did the trick with the 5 different size rings, they were all physically interlocked with each other. It means when you're trying to do a new piece of juggling, and you're trying to make something that is specific to a shape, it's really good that they physically interact. And that way you use the special properties exactly of that shape. And they can interlock in different ways. So I'm a little bit, again, I don't know, ashamed or embarrassed to stand up here in front of you and say, I've been juggling for 30 years. We have a PhD program in juggling. And what we're doing is making different size circles and triangles. It seems a little bit pathetic. If I look around at other art forms and I think about, photography, for example, oh, hey, I made a photo. It's a little bit smaller. Yeah, great. But this is because up until about 6 months ago, everybody thought that juggling was 4,000 years old. And in that context, thinking about innovation of 4,000 years of an art form to make different size circles and different shapes, it's a little bit sad, I think. But 6 months ago, a colleague of mine from Stockholm, his name is Erik Åberg, he was doing some historical research into juggling, and he found out that juggling is in fact only about 100 years old. What we're doing today, what we're all working on, what we call juggling today, is only about 100 years old. And in terms of that, I'm really happy and excited to stand up here in front of you and say, yeah, now we have different size circles. Now we actually have triangles, because we didn't have that 100 years ago. And it's really exciting to be making history right now with juggling. It's 100 years old, it's a very young art form, and I get to be, at the forefront, and these really, in one way, trivial or small innovations, but they are innovations nonetheless, and it's really fun. This goes back to this idea that when the manufacturer in Switzerland made the smaller ring, remember I said I couldn't understand why it existed, and I wanted to justify what we were going to do with it. There is this divide between the manufacturers and the artists who practice juggling. And so we have, as an artist, what I call a choice of destructive creation. Destructive creation means that personally, I'm a juggler. I don't know how to mold industrial mold, injection mold plastic. That's not my specialty. But I can destroy something to create something new. It means I can cut, break, bend, twist, or glue shapes that already exist and to make new shapes. So for example, here, I have a normal juggling club that I've cut a hole in. And again, it's funny because it is a normal club. It's the normal size, shape, weight, length, diameter, center of gravity. There's a standard juggling club. And so I just cut a hole in it. And in fact, they're still able to be used as you would normally use a normal juggling club. And they still fall on the ground, just like a normal juggling club would fall on the ground. It's no problem. So you can see that the hole doesn't affect that, and that gravity still has its way with them. But, thank you. But because of this hole, I can suddenly do new shapes, new patterns, and new figures that were never possible before and have never been seen before in the world of juggling. And this is one of my favorite ones, if this works. Otherwise, it's one of my least favorite ones. Yes, thank you. It's one of my favorite ones. So we are stuck. There's no discourse, there's no dialogue between the people who are making these objects and the people who are using them. And now I'd like to show you a trick that literally nobody has seen in the world. In fact, honestly, I didn't even practice this because I wanted you to be the first people ever to see it. It means, now before you get too excited, it's the same trick I've already done with the orange rings, but wait. The company who made the first smaller ring 15 years ago, they made the smaller ring in pink as well as orange, and a few other colors. Yeah, you're into pink? Anybody? Thank you. Well, sorry to say that until about 4 months ago, there were no big rings in pink. And honestly, truth be told, it's taken me 6 years of my life of working with a manufacturer on various levels, politically, financially, and otherwise, to have a big ring made in pink. And I'm the only person in the world with big pink rings, which also makes me the best big pink ring juggler in the world by default. So I'm going to try to do that same pattern with pink rings. And you could ask me, and you could say, well, hey, what's the big deal? What does it mean? You just did it earlier with the orange rings. It looks the same. And honestly, I don't know what it means. I don't know yet what it means, but what I do know is that it has a chance now to mean something, because it did not exist before. We had never seen that pattern. Literally, what I just did a few seconds ago, nobody has ever seen it before. I can't tell you what it means yet, but what I do know is that now we can start to discuss visual design, aesthetics of our work. We can juggle big pink rings. And in the same way that I made use of this small ring which I think is quite effective. I really like the patterns I showed you. It means I'm sure, I'm confident in the future in juggling that juggling with pink rings will have some sort of significance. It will have some sort of impact on the technique. For example, let's say that you're a painter. Imagine this, you're a painter, and someone says to you, you can only use one color blue for your whole life. You want to paint the ocean? Well, here's your blue. You want to paint the sky? Oh, it's the same blue. And that's exactly what we had as jugglers up until about 1 month ago. We had one color blue. You go on the internet, and you want to order your juggling rings, and here's the color blue. There you go. I hope you like it. It's taken me 8 years working on this project, and it just happened last month that I got 5 different shades of blue. So, thank you for being excited as I am. But imagine that. Imagine telling somebody, hey, I'm a visual artist, I'm a painter, and I use one color blue. There's one color of blue paint. That's ridiculous, right? As an artist, you wouldn't stand for it. And so now we have 5 different colors of blue, and it means that you can focus on the whole pattern, or you can focus on each individual ring, each individual shade of blue. And then you can start to see different details inside of the pattern. I think to somebody who doesn't juggle, when I juggle, perhaps you see a big mess of things in the air. But as a juggler, I see each and every individual object. It's because I have to control each and every individual object. I can't just look at the pattern and say, oh, it's a big mess, I hope it doesn't fall down. So I have to be aware of everything that's happening. And I wanted to try to communicate this to an audience. It means when I'm juggling the 5 different shades of blue, you could zoom out and see the whole shape that's generally blue, or focus in on a specific shade, and maybe start to understand details that weren't possible before. As an artist, I have another level of expression that I can work with. So to conclude, for now, before I'm going to be back this evening, and I hope to see some of you here, we're going to do some different things. But for now, I'd like to try to communicate to you what it feels like for me when I juggle. And in this way, I was looking for an object that would give some sort of trace of its history, some sort of idea or information of where it's been and how it's been interacting with myself and the other objects. Almost like a time machine. I needed a time machine. And so, in fact, I invented a very elaborate, very expensive, very cutting edge. The technology, it's not really, I shouldn't really be talking about. This isn't going out anywhere, is it? Nobody, it's just us in this room, okay? So I have this very innovative technology. It's called a 3D printer ball. It's a 3D printer that as it goes through the air, it leaves a trail. It's 3D printing all the time. It looks like this. So it's my 3D printer ball. And as I juggle these, you're going to start to see how these objects interact with each other in the air and how they interact with my body in a way that wasn't visible before. And as I juggle them, I hope you get a little bit of the feeling that I do when I juggle. And in fact, I have some music to juggle this to. Please. Thank you so much. I'll see you later tonight. Thanks for having me.
Jay Gilligan, everybody.
Go juggling.
Great job, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.